Mace Windu was the only Jedi who openly admitted that genuine darkness lived inside him. Instead of suppressing it, he built a weapon to channel it. He sat on the highest seat of the Jedi Council, created the most dangerous lightsaber form ever practiced, and defeated the most powerful Sith Lord in 1,000 years in single combat. He held a blade at Darth Sidious' throat and had every reason to believe that he had saved the Republic, but he was wrong. From childhood, the Force gave Windu an ability that no other Jedi possessed. He could see where things would break. He could perceive the hidden fractures in people and objects in the Force itself, the critical weak points that held the world together. He built his entire career around this gift, using it to win battles, read enemies, and guide the Order through its darkest years. But on the night that decided the fate of the galaxy, the one Shatterpoint he never thought to check was standing right behind him. This and all following information are drawn from official Star Wars legends and canon sources. We highly recommend exploring these stories. Chapter 1. Above the Cloud Sea. Haruun Kal was a planet where survival was earned, never guaranteed. The surface lay drowned beneath a toxic sea of volcanic gases called the Cloud Sea, and only the mountain peaks rising above this barrier could sustain life. The native human population, known as the Korunnai, lived as nomadic herders in the treacherous highlands, where predators like branch leopards, vine cats, and fever wasps made every journey a gamble. It was here, on a world whose name translated to above the clouds, that Mace Windu was born. The Korunnai were remarkable because every member of their population was Force sensitive. As recounted in Shatterpoint, Jedi scholars trace the Korunnai lineage back roughly 4,000 years to the Great Sith War, when a starship carrying Jedi Knights reportedly crashed on the planet, and the stranded survivors eventually became the ancestors of the Korunnai people. They organized into extended family clans called Ghôsh, and Windu was born into the Ghôsh Windu. Carvaster, a fierce warrior who shared his deep connection to the Force, was also of Ghôsh Windu, making the two men clan brothers from birth. But before Windu ever held a lightsaber, his home world had already begun shaping him. Korean culture was built on 4 pillars: honor, duty, family, and herd, with honor ranked highest, demanding honesty, bravery, and integrity above all else. The Korunnai used their Force abilities to bond with Akdogs, powerful predators that served as companions and protectors, and grassers, the massive creatures they herded across the highland plateaus. The planet had a tragically high mortality rate among its children, and only the strongest survived the harsh conditions of the highlands. Windu's parents perished in the jungles when he was only 6 months old, leaving him alone before he could even speak. Jedi anthropologists had been studying the Korunnai, fascinated that an entire population could touch the Force. They asked the Windu clan if they might take the child back to the Jedi Order, and since his parents were already gone, the clan agreed. He had not yet reached his naming day, so the Order gave him the name he carried for the rest of his life as he entered the academy on Coruscant. The Jedi Temple on Coruscant was the largest training center in the galaxy, housing thousands of younglings, Padawans, knights, and masters within its ancient halls. For the boy from the harsh world, the temple offered structure, education, and the closest thing to family he would ever know. But unlike many of his fellow younglings who took comfort in the temple's safety, young Windu approached his training with an intensity that unsettled his teachers. He did not play, but instead prepared relentlessly, and that seriousness drew attention early. Where other Jedi approached the Force with wonder, this boy approached it with gravity. The world Windu came from was one where danger was constant and losing focus could prove fatal, and this forged in him a survival mindset from infancy. Even though he was too young to remember Haruun Kal consciously, the Force-sensitive boy carried its imprint in his being. Unlike many younglings who arrived at the temple from peaceful worlds, the Koran boy entered the Order already primed for watchfulness, control, and the discipline that would define him. This lesson was bred into his bones by a world of poisonous clouds and predatory jungles. That survival instinct shaped every choice he made as a Jedi, and it fed a fear of chaos rooted so deeply that he could never fully separate caution from control. It was both his greatest powerful asset and the seed of what critics eventually called his rigidity. Where other Jedi might approach training with playfulness, young Windu treated each exercise as preparation for something urgent. Yet, the temple's instructors quickly realized that this boy from the harsh world carried far more than training, a volatile fire burning beneath the surface that none of them had seen in a youngling before, and it would take a rare and extraordinary force ability to reveal just how different Mace Windu was from every other student in the Order, an ability that would change how he saw the galaxy and everything in it. Chapter 2: The Boy Who Saw Shatterpoints. However, the temple's training halls soon reveal something about young Windu that nobody had expected. Like all younglings, the Korunnai boy received instruction from Grandmaster Yoda himself during his earliest years. Even among the gifted children who fill the Jedi Temple, Windu stood apart. He carried intense emotions, a fire that burned inside him hotter and more volatile than what most younglings possessed. His instructor noticed this intensity early on, and it set him apart from his peers in ways that were not always comfortable for anyone involved. At a young age, the boy discovered a rare force ability, and that is, he could perceive Shatterpoints. This was not an ordinary sight, but a deep perception of how things connected within the Force, and how the Force bound them to themselves and to all things around them. Shatterpoints reveal critical junctions that other things depended upon. If identified and acted upon, these weak points could hold the key to averting disaster, winning battles, or fulfilling the will of the Force itself. Then he realized something that changed how he saw himself and every Jedi around. As recounted in the Legends novel Shatterpoint, Windu was 6 or 7 standard years old before he understood that other students, full-grown knights, and even wise masters could only sense these connections with great difficulty and concentration. The Force showed him strengths and weaknesses, hidden flaws, and unexpected uses, and vectors of stress that squeezed, stretched, or sheared. When he looked at someone through the Force, he could see where they would break. This ability sharpened his strategic mind from childhood. It also placed a heavy weight on him because knowing where things could break meant that he felt responsible to act when others hesitated, and to act correctly without exception. While other younglings approached their training with curiosity and play, the Korunnai boy treated each lesson as preparation for a crisis that could not afford mistakes. The seriousness that already defined him only deepened as his perception of the Force grew stronger. Still, the deeper struggle was not about power, but about what raged silently inside him. The Jedi Code taught peace and serenity as the natural state of a Force user, but young Windu's version was closer to restraint and constant suppression of strong currents running beneath the surface. He did not naturally arrive at peace. Windu fought for it against his own nature at all times. Where others found calm through surrender, the Korunnai boy found it only through control, and that difference set the pattern for his life. This was the central tension of his existence, the difference between genuine inner peace and the forceful containment of intense emotions that look like peace from the outside. His sense of right and wrong was strict, not cruel but unyielding. There were lines he believed should never be crossed, and he spent his youth building walls around each one of them. The boy from the harsh world was constructing his defenses early, and every wall he built made him stronger and more isolated at the same time. One of his early instructors was Sa, a member of the legendary Neti species of sapient mobile trees who helped train him during his formative years. The first time Windu managed to best one of his instructors came during a sparring match with Sa, who was surprised but respected his skill. During the same years, he also developed a long-lasting friendship with a fellow Jedi named Sora Bulk, a Weequay already considered one of the Order's finest lightsaber practitioners. That friendship would carry serious consequences for them both. However, despite his growing mastery of the Force and the respect he had earned from seasoned instructors, one challenge remained that frustrated the young Windu more than any other, and it involved his lightsaber. The one weapon whose construction tested not his strength or his intellect, but the one quality he found hardest to summon, the willingness to let go of control and simply trust the Force to guide what his hands alone can never assemble. Chapter 3: The Purple Blade. But building that weapon proved to be one of the hardest things he ever did. Despite his remarkable talent in the Force, the Korunnai boy famously struggled with the construction of his first lightsaber. In canon, the ancient architect droid Professor Huyang supervised his attempts and concluded that the youngling had neither the patience nor the correct understanding to complete the weapon. Huyang advised Windu to temper his emotions because a lightsaber's components never needed to be built in the traditional sense. A Jedi did not deliberately construct a lightsaber through force of will. Instead, they allowed the Force to guide the components together because the lightsaber was meant to be an extension of the Jedi themselves. This advice frustrated the intense young Windu, but it eventually helped him understand a basic truth about balance. Forcing things together through willpower alone was not the same as allowing them to come together through trust. The pieces were already whole, and they needed someone willing to let the Force bring them together. For Windu, this was the hardest lesson of his youth. His whole approach to the Force was built on control and decisive action, and the lightsaber construction process demanded the opposite. The boy needed to surrender his will to the Force and trust that the outcome would be correct. It went against every instinct the boy from Haruun Kal possessed. His eventual success did not erase the struggle, but it proved that he could learn to let go, even if letting go never came naturally. As recounted in the canon comic Age of Republic, this became his first real lesson. The frustration he felt was essential to his growth, though he could not see it at the time. As shown in Age of Republic Special Number 1, he eventually understood that he had struggled because he was trying to impose his will on the process rather than listening to the Force, and the instant he surrendered control was when the weapon finally came together. Within Legends lore, the origin of the blade's distinctive color carries even deeper meaning. According to the story Stones from Star Wars Tales number 13, young Windu had been having recurring visions of a specific lightsaber with a purple blade, despite never having held one. By age 14, he had still not yet completed a lightsaber despite his exceptional skill. Grandmaster Yoda understood that Windu wanted a challenge, and at Yoda's direction, the 14-year-old was sent alone to the planet Hurricane in wild space. Eventually, what started as a test of skill turned into a lasting lesson of compassion. Hurricane was inhabited by sentient beings made entirely of crystalline stone and purple minerals. The young Jedi was chased by the stone natives who saw him as an intruder, and confident in his abilities, he toyed with his pursuers as he evaded them. When one of the stone beings attempted to follow him across a canyon and plummeted to the ground, shattering its crystalline body on impact, the boy was horrified at what his recklessness had caused. Windu stopped fleeing immediately and painstakingly used the Force to reconstruct the shattered native, piece by piece, healing the being he had broken through his own carelessness. In gratitude for his mercy, the restored native presented Windu with the rare amethyst hurricane crystals, which possess unusual hardness and could produce lightsaber blades of extraordinary strength. With these crystals, the young Jedi built his signature weapon, a lightsaber that produced a distinctive violet blade, unlike any other in the Jedi Order. In canon, the crystal turned purple when it bonded with him during the construction process, as all kyber crystals are colorless until they connect with a Force user. The distinctive electrum plating on his lightsaber hilt gave the weapon a regal, golden appearance, fitting for a Jedi who walked an uncommon path. The purple blade stood as a symbol of his identity, balanced between the blue of Jedi Guardians and the red of aggression, representing a warrior who stood apart from the rest of the Order. Nevertheless, the crystal was not obtained through force, but through humility and the willingness to repair what had been broken. And that same lesson applied to far more than lightsaber construction, because on a plague-ravaged world where a fraud exploited the desperate, the young Padawan learned that the line between righteous justice and personal vengeance was dangerously thin, and terrifyingly easy to cross when emotions ran high and rage felt indistinguishable from righteousness. Chapter 4: Justice and Control. Yet that test came sooner than expected, on a mission that would establish his pattern. Following his trials as a youngling, Windu became the Padawan of Jedi Master Sizzlin Mir, a Marialan who imparted upon her young apprentice a strong belief in the rule of law and the importance of measured justice. She taught him that the galaxy was full of injustice, but that a Jedi's response must always be tempered by wisdom and restraint. a principle that would define his character permanently. As depicted in a flashback from the canon Marvel comic Jedi of the Republic issue 4, a pivotal mission tested the young Padawan beyond combat. A man named Druze had taken residence in a Jedi outreach temple on the planet Mythos. With the local population suffering from the Niffin plague, Druze convinced the desperate people he was a Jedi prophet who could heal the sick in return for their faith and servitude. He was a fraud, and the Order dispatched Mir and her Padawan to bring him down. As they approached the temple, Windu observed the people suffering and was affected, not by the plague itself, but by how completely Druze had corrupted the trust these people had placed in someone they believed to be a Jedi. This was not a simple crime for the young Padawan. This was personal because Druze had taken the most sacred relationship in the galaxy, the bond between Jedi and the people they served, and twisted it into a tool for exploitation. However, the confrontation with Druze revealed a troubling impulse inside the young Padawan himself. Windu pursued the charlatan through the temple and defeated his bodyguards despite his youth, though Druze managed to wound his arm with a blaster. Using the Force to hold the man in place, Windu disarmed him, but his anger was building rapidly. The charlatan had corrupted trust, exploited the desperate, and twisted the idea of what the Jedi stood for. Windu was ready to punish rather than arrest. Master Mir intervened and ordered Windu to lower his lightsaber before he crossed a line that can never be uncrossed. Jedi do not decide outcomes alone, and they must never become judge, jury, and enforcer, no matter how righteous the anger feels in the moment. The line between justice and vengeance is crossed, not through intent, but through action. Mir taught her Padawan to recognize when he was approaching that line and to stop himself before it was too late. It was a lesson he carried for the rest of his life. Then, Windu became a knight, and his career accelerated faster than anyone could have predicted. One of the most significant events of this period was his rescue of a young, orphan girl named Depa Billaba from space pirates. He took Depa as his Padawan, and she proved to be one of his most talented students, and one of the finest Jedi of her generation. Their relationship was deep, almost like that of a father and daughter, and the Korunnai Master was immensely proud of her achievements. As chronicled in the canon Marvel comic Age of Republic Special No. 1, the Council deployed Windu to the Outer Rim planet of Uzalon due to attacks committed by the warlord Guatako. Windu deliberately allowed himself to be captured to discover the location of the warlord's hidden base, buried inside 80,000 kilometers of tunnels. Upon learning that Guatako's operation relied on kidnapped children forced to serve as soldiers, the Jedi Master tried to convince a child named Koya to abandon the insurgents, hoping to save them all. Guatako assumed his prisoner was helpless, a fatal miscalculation, as the Jedi Master used telekinesis to reassemble his weapon and fought his way free. The other Jedi arrived, and the remaining insurgents were taken into custody by Uzalon's security forces. Although they rescued 26 abducted children, Windu had hoped to save Koya and the child soldiers who were already a part of Guatako's cause. Yoda reminded him that the Jedi were forbidden from interfering in local affairs. Windu accepted the outcome, but wished he could have done more. At the age of 28, Windu became the youngest Jedi ever appointed to the Council. His wisdom and his words were considered legendary within the Order, and he was often regarded as second only to Grandmaster Yoda, despite being 8 centuries younger. Eventually, sometime before the Naboo Crisis, the Korunnai Master was elected as Master of the Order, the leader of the Jedi Council, and the overall second-in-command of the Jedi after the Grand Master. Windu's leadership faced further testing during the Yanchori Uprising, where the Jedi battled a Force-resistant species attempting to conquer nearby star systems. As depicted in the comic Acts of War, Windu deployed Jedi strike teams against the rebellion and personally led a team to the Yanchori home world. Because the Yanchori possessed a natural resistance to Force manipulation, the Jedi Master had to rely more heavily on tactical planning and conventional combat strategy, skills that proved essential when the Clone Wars demanded military leadership. But the man who sat on the Council's highest seat carried a secret that none of his peers fully understood, because the darkness he had been fighting since childhood had never gone away. and instead of continuing to suppress it, the Korunnai Master decided to do something that no other Jedi in the Order's long history had ever attempted. And he would build a fighting style designed specifically to channel his own darkness and use it as a weapon. Chapter 5: Vapad. When Windu looked inward and acknowledged that real darkness lived inside him, everything changed. Working alongside his old friend Sora Bulk, who was skilled in all 7 lightsaber forms, Windu drew inspiration from a predatory creature native to the planet Serapen, called the Vapad, whose tentacles struck with blinding speed, moving so fast that they were impossible to count until the creature stopped moving entirely. Together, they developed a new variation of Form 7 named after this creature. Form 7, also known as Juyo, was the most vicious and demanding of all lightsaber combat styles. It drew heavily upon a practitioner's emotions to fuel dominance in combat, and due to its closeness to the dark side, it had been restricted and, at times, forbidden by the Council. Vapad was Windu's modified version, a controlled channel where the practitioner accepted their own aggressive feelings and even drew upon the dark side energy of their opponent, turning it back against them. The user rode the edge between light and dark, using aggression without surrendering to it. A Vapad user served as a conduit, creating what Shatterpoint describes as a superconducting loop in the Force. Dark energy flows in from the opponent, gets amplified by the Jedi's skills and their own darker impulses, and returns to the opponent with devastating force. In the Legends novelization of Revenge of the Sith, Anakin Skywalker once observed Windu's blade work and perceived it as a sphere of purple fire containing dozens of blades attacking from every angle simultaneously. Remarkably, every other practitioner who ever attempted the form was consumed by its pull. Sora Bulk, who had helped create Vapad, grew fascinated by the dark side during its development. The darkness that Vapad required its users to channel proved too seductive for Bulk to resist, and according to the Legends Mace Windu comic by Dark Horse, he gradually surrendered to the pull rather than learning to contain it. As Windu observed with bitter precision, Bulk did not master Vapad, and instead, Vapad mastered him completely. Depa Billaba also trained in Vapad under his guidance and was considered nearly unbeatable in single combat. Her natural aptitude for the form impressed Windu, though he remained watchful, knowing that even the most talented practitioner could be consumed by its pull if their focus ever wavered. Quinlan Vos learned some Vapad maneuvers from Bulk without Windu's knowledge, and when the Korunnai Master recognized a Vapad technique during a sparring match, he immediately warned Vos against its use, noting that the form could take the user dangerously close to the dark side. Yet Windu, alone among all practitioners, remained uncorrupted, the only true Vapad master. Windu had looked into his own shadow, acknowledged its existence, designed a system to contain it, and maintained that system for decades without faltering. No other Jedi had managed to do anything comparable to Form 7. The discipline required formed the foundation of all he did as a leader, and it shaped how he viewed every Jedi who walked a less controlled path. His creation of Vapad shaped his role on the Jedi Council. Because he understood darkness from the inside, Windu served as the personal guardian of tradition, the one who feared chaos most keenly because he knew from personal experience how easily order could shatter. His strict adherence to Jedi protocol, his intolerance for maverick behavior, his suspicion of emotional attachment, these were not the reflexes of a cold bureaucrat, but the discipline of a man who knew what would happen if the walls came down. In The Phantom Menace, Windu denied Qui-Gon's request to train the boy. Never patient with those who disobeyed the Council, the Korunnai Master doubted the maverick Jedi Qui-Gon Jinn's belief that the ancient Sith had returned, and he thought little of Qui-Gon's insistence that young Anakin Skywalker was the chosen one. He sensed fear in the child and concluded that training him posed too great a risk. This initial assessment, whether it was wisdom or blindness, cast a long shadow over his relationship with Skywalker. After Qui-Gon fell at the hands of Darth Maul on Naboo, Windu accepted two truths he had resisted. The Sith had indeed returned, and Anakin Skywalker would be trained despite his objections. His distrust of the boy began the day that Qui-Gon brought him before the Council, and it never faded. According to the canon novel The Glass Abyss by Stephen Barnes, the Korunnai Master received a final message from Qui-Gon, marked to be delivered upon his passing, containing a plea to help the Outer Rim planet Metagos. A violent solar flare had transformed the planet's surface into a landscape of irradiated glass, and the surviving inhabitants fled underground, where rival criminal clans fought to control the limited resources. Windu traveled there to fulfill his fallen colleague's last request, facing circumstances that pushed him to the boundaries of the Jedi Code while operating far from the Temple and Council politics. The mission tested his beliefs in ways that no amount of discipline had prepared him for, and then a war began that would test that resolve in ways he never imagined. Because the Jedi Order was about to be handed an army and told to fight, and the man who had spent decades mastering his own darkness would watch as the galaxy stripped his control away, one compromise at a time, hardening him into someone willing to do things that the Jedi he had been before the first shot was fired on Geonosis would never have recognized. Chapter 6: The Clone Wars. Then the Clone Wars erupted, and everything Mace Windu had built was tested to breaking. The 2024 canon Marvel Comics miniseries Mace Windu by Mark Bernardin takes place before the war and showcases a younger Windu on early adventures that highlight his skills as an investigator and warrior before the Clone Wars changed him. 10 years after the Naboo crisis, the Separatist movement under Count Dooku had grown into a galactic threat. When Obi-Wan Kenobi was captured on Geonosis, Windu personally led a strike team of 212 Jedi to rescue him. During Attack of the Clones, during the chaos, the Korunnai Master struck down the infamous bounty hunter Jango Fett, the template for the entire clone army, with devastating precision. One clean swing of his purple blade ended the fight instantly. The Separatist forces overwhelmed his Jedi, and only the arrival of Yoda with the newly revealed clone army prevented total destruction. The galaxy was now at war, and the Jedi had been forced into an unfamiliar and perilous role as military generals commanding armies of clone troopers across dozens of fronts simultaneously. Shortly after Geonosis, Windu was tasked with investigating Separatist activity on a dark jungle planet. As depicted in the canon Marvel comic Jedi of the Republic, Windu selected 3 Jedi companions for the mission to Hisrich, including council member Kit Fisto, the blind but perceptive Prasad Dibs, and the newly knighted Risa Mano. They discovered a mercenary droid named ADW-4, hired by General Grievous, was harvesting energy-producing plants that could tip the war in the Separatist behavior, destroying the ecosystem and threatening the native population. During the mission, Prasad Dibs grew increasingly disillusioned. After discovering the remains of the people they'd been trying to protect, Dibs confronted Windu directly, accusing the Jedi Order of corrupting the Force by becoming soldiers. The confrontation escalated until Dibs ignited his lightsaber and attacked. Windu defeated him but chose mercy over lethal force, restraining him for the remainder of the mission and then defending him before the council, arguing that Dibs was as much a victim of the war as anyone else. Windu moved for Dibs' punishment to be confinement in the Jedi Library rather than expulsion from the Order. The council agreed, but Dibs accepted the sentence with bitter contempt, warning the Korunnai Master that his pride would be his downfall. The accusation stung because it carried a grain of truth. Windu's confidence in the Jedi Order's righteousness left no room for the possibility that Dibs might have a point, and the Korunnai Master dismissed the warning without a second thought, never considering that mercy alone might not be enough to reach someone already lost. Meanwhile, one of Windu's most celebrated military campaigns was the liberation of Ryloth itself. As shown in the Clone Wars episode Liberty on Ryloth, after Skywalker secured the space above and Kenobi took the southern hemisphere, Windu faced the final objective, retaking the capital city of Lezu, where Separatist Emir Wat Tambor had established his command center. Rather than a costly siege, the Jedi General sought the help of the Twi'lek resistance under Cham Syndulla, and led a daring assault, crossing the Plasma Bridge with only 2 clone troopers. The liberation succeeded, and Windu earned the title of the Hammer of Ryloth among the Twi'lek people, a name that endured even when the Empire later tried to erase the Jedi from galactic history. The consequences of Geonosis also followed Windu in intensely personal ways. Young Boba Fett, the unaltered clone of Jango, harbored a burning desire for revenge. As shown in the Clone Wars, Boba infiltrated clone cadets aboard a Republic warship, planted a bomb in Windu's quarters, and sabotaged the reactor. Windu and Skywalker were lured to Vancor and nearly perished before rescue arrived. The attempted revenge showed that the consequences of Geonosis would follow the Korunnai Master for years. Boba Fett was a child driven by grief and rage, and Windu recognized the pattern because he had seen it in himself. The war was creating orphans and turning them into weapons. The cycle that the Jedi were supposed to prevent. With every new campaign, the distance between the peacekeepers the Jedi were meant to be and the generals they had become grew wider, and Windu felt that distance more acutely than most. As told in Shatterpoint, the war's most devastating chapter for Windu was deeply personal. The Council had sent his former Padawan Depa Billaba to Haruun Kal, Windu's birth world, to train the Korunnai as guerrilla fighters against the separatist-aligned Balawai. All contact with Depa was lost, and a disturbing recording hinted she had fallen to the dark side. Windu traveled alone to the jungles of his home world that he barely remembered, searching for the woman who had been like a daughter to him. Deep in the wilderness, he found Depa corrupted by the horrors of the Summertime War and influenced by Kar Vaster, a dangerous force user of Ghôsh Windu, his own clan. The woman who had been like a daughter to him had become someone he barely recognized. Windu defeated her in combat, and she was returned to Coruscant in a comatose state. The experience forced him to confront the true cost of sending people he cared about into war, a cost that no amount of Jedi discipline could absorb. In the Clone Wars micro-series by Genndy Tartakovsky, Windu's most spectacular feats were displayed during the Battle of Dantooine, where he single-handedly dismantled most of the Separatist droid army and destroyed their massive seismic tank without assistance. For a portion of the battle, the Jedi Master fought without his lightsaber, using Vapad for unarmed combat, destroying droids with his bare hands, in sequences that showed how devastating his mastery of the form could be when fully unleashed against an army. As the war ground on relentlessly, Windu underwent a transformation that no amount of preparation could reverse, shifting from peacekeeper to someone willing to do things the Jedi would never have accepted before the conflict began, because the longer the fighting lasted and the more power Palpatine accumulated, the more convinced the Korunnai Master became that the real threat to the Republic was not the Separatist armies on distant battlefields, but the man sitting in the Chancellor's office on Coruscant. Chapter 7: The Chancellor. By this stage of the war, Palpatine's influence over the Jedi Order had grown, making it impossible to ignore. The Supreme Chancellor had cultivated a private bond with Anakin Skywalker that bypassed the Council entirely, meeting with the young Jedi Knight regularly and drawing him closer with every passing month. Windu watched this relationship with growing unease, recognizing that no politician had ever inserted himself so far into the affairs of a Jedi. The Chancellor framed his attention as fatherly concern, but the Korunnai Master saw it as interference, and the pattern only intensified as the war dragged on. As the Clone Wars progressed, Windu's suspicion of Palpatine deepened with every emergency power the Senate handed over. Though he never guessed the Chancellor was Darth Sidious, the Korunnai Master watched as the Senate became a rubber stamp for one man's authority. As Palpatine accumulated power that no single leader in the Republic had ever held, drawing from the canon novel Dark Disciple by Christie Golden, the Jedi Council made the decision to target Count Dooku for elimination, a plan Windu readily supported, while others were more hesitant. This was a serious departure from traditional Jedi ethics. The Korunnai Master, who once taught his Padawan that Jedi must never become enforcers, was now sanctioning the targeted elimination of a political leader. He discussed the possibility of removing the Chancellor himself and controlling the political transition of the Republic. The war had brought him here one compromise at a time, and with every emergency power granted to Palpatine, the Guardian of Rules moved closer to breaking the biggest rule of all. Instead of pulling back from the edge, the war pushed Windu further past it daily. Every new crisis confirmed his worst fears about how concentrated the Chancellor's authority had become. The closer Palpatine drew Anakin Skywalker into his orbit, the more volatile the situation grew for the Order itself. Windu saw the pattern, but his response was to tighten his grip on what he could control rather than build trust with Anakin that might have altered the outcome. This failure of connection became the most consequential mistake of his life. Then, Palpatine's request to place Anakin on the Jedi Council pushed everything to breaking. As seen in Revenge of the Sith, Windu warned his fellow masters that pairing the Chancellor with the powerful but emotionally volatile young knight was dangerous. When the Council reluctantly granted Anakin a seat, it was Windu who delivered the devastating notification that Skywalker would sit on the Council, but would not be granted the rank of Jedi Master. From Windu's perspective, the decision made perfect sense. The rank of Jedi Master required emotional maturity, wisdom earned through decades of service, and a proven ability to set aside personal feelings for the greater good. Anakin had demonstrated none of these qualities. He was formidable, arguably the most gifted Jedi alive, but power without control was exactly what Windu feared most. The Council would not grant promotions because the Chancellor wished it, and Windu would not compromise on that principle. From Windu's perspective, Anakin had not yet demonstrated the emotional maturity required. From Anakin's perspective, it was the culmination of years of distrust and dismissal from a man who had doubted him since he was a child. The Council then asked Anakin to spy on Palpatine, a decision that Windu supported but that Kenobi opposed. The tension between Windu and Skywalker had been building for over a decade, and every new demand from the Council only deepened the fracture between them. The Stover novelization reveals that Windu even began discussing the possibility of taking direct control of the Republic's political transition if the Chancellor cannot be removed through legal means. The man who had built his identity around guarding tradition and institutional order was now seriously considering a political overthrow of the Republic's elected leader. Step by step, compromise by compromise, the war had brought him to a place where the Guardian of Rules was ready to break the biggest rule of all. And then, Anakin Skywalker walked into Windu's office and told him the truth about Palpatine. The Chancellor was the Sith Lord, Darth Sidious. After Obi-Wan eliminated General Grievous on Utapau, Windu had no reason to wait. He told Anakin to stay in the Council chambers and not to interfere. Then, he gathered 3 fellow Jedi Masters, Kit Fisto, Anakin Kolar, and Saesee Tiin. The 4 of them marched to the Chancellor's office to arrest him. But Windu told Anakin to remain behind, and that single decision, the choice to leave the most emotionally unstable knight in the Order, sitting alone with his fears, while the confrontation of a lifetime unfolded without him, set in motion the chain of events that would destroy the Jedi, the Republic, and Mace Windu himself, because Anakin did not stay in the Council chambers, and what followed shattered the galaxy. Chapter 8: The Final Stand. Yet this was what Windu had feared and prepared for across his career. The confrontation began with a declaration of arrest, to which Palpatine responded with legal arguments and accusations of persecution. When Windu insisted, Sidious attacked with terrifying speed, producing a crimson lightsaber and cutting down Anakin Kolar and Saesee Tiin in mere seconds. Kit Fisto lasted only moments longer before falling. Only Windu remained standing against the full power of the Dark Lord of the Sith. The duel between Windu and Sidious was everything the Quarren Master had built toward. Sinking into Vapad as he had never done before, he fought the Dark Lord of the Sith blade to blade. In the Legends novelization by Matthew Stover, his fighting state was described as unprecedented. The realization that the Republic he had devoted his life to serving had already fallen under Sith control poured fury into the Force, and through Vapad, Windu channeled it all back against the Sith Lord with devastating precision. The superconducting loop that Vapad created between them reached its peak. Sidious's own dark side power flowed into Windu's form and was amplified by the Quarren Master's lifelong familiarity with darkness, and returned against the Sith Lord with compounding force. Every attack Sidious made only strengthened his opponent. The Dark Lord of the Sith, who had orchestrated the fall of an entire republic from the shadows, found himself losing ground to a single Jedi who had spent decades preparing for exactly this confrontation. and George Lucas himself confirmed that Windu genuinely won the lightsaber duel against the Sith. The Jedi Master drove Sidious back through the office, out onto the wind-blown ledge of the shattered window. A swift kick sent Sidious staggering, his lightsaber flying into the Coruscant skyline. Windu held his blade to the Sith Lord's throat. In the novelization, Windu realized through his Shatterpoint ability that Sidious's weakness was Anakin Skywalker himself. Critically, he did not check on Anakin's Shatterpoint. Palpatine hurled Force lightning at Windu while simultaneously begging for mercy, performing the role of a helpless old man being attacked by an out-of-control Jedi. Windu deflected the lightning back with his lightsaber, the redirected current deforming Sidious's face into his now infamous twisted visage. The lightning stopped, and the Sith Lord lay on the floor, seemingly broken and spent. And Windu made his decision. Windu declared Palpatine too dangerous to be left alive and raised his blade. But the man who learned Jedi must never become an enforcer now raised his own blade. The war had brought him to the exact place his master had once warned him about on Mathas. He had come full circle, and this time there was no teacher to stop him. Palpatine controlled the Senate and the courts. A trial would be meaningless because the system Windu had always trusted was already compromised beyond repair. And in that moment, as the Korunnai Master raised his blade, Anakin Skywalker arrived. Driven by his terror of losing Padme, desperate to preserve the only being who had promised him the power to save her, Anakin severed Windu's lightsaber hand in a single stroke. As Stover writes, Windu realized too late that he had forgotten to look for Anakin's own Shatterpoint, the young man's willingness to betray anyone and destroy all of it to save his wife. The one factor Windu could not control was another person's choice, and it was the one factor that decided the outcome. The ability that had defined him since childhood, the gift that had let him see where things would break, had failed him at the critical hour because he never turned it on the one person standing behind him. He had spent a lifetime building walls against his own darkness, and those walls had blinded him to the darkness growing in someone else. Decades of distrust had made it impossible for Windu to see Anakin as anything other than a risk to be managed, never as a person to be reached. Sidious dropped all pretense, and with a rejuvenated surge of lightning, he ended it. He blasted the disarmed and wounded Jedi Master through the shattered window. Mace Windu fell from the towering heights of the Senate office building and vanished into the Coruscant night, bringing an end to the life of one of the most formidable Jedi who had ever lived. His fall and Anakin's role in it directly triggered the events that destroyed the Jedi Order. As Palpatine branded the Jedi as traitors, issued Order 66, and transformed the Republic into the Galactic Empire. In the hours that followed, the clone troopers who had served alongside the Jedi for 3 years turned their weapons on their generals. Across the galaxy, Jedi Masters and Padawans fell to the soldiers they had trusted with their lives. The temple on Coruscant was stormed, and the order that had stood for 1,000 generations was destroyed in a single night. And all of it traced back to that office, that window, and the moment Mace Windu raised his blade and Anakin Skywalker made his choice. General Chamsin Dola remembered the Jedi Master with great respect and told his daughter Hera the tale of how Windu helped liberate their world. The name Hammer of Ryloth endured through the darkness that followed. Mace Windu had stood at the edge of saving the Republic, the blade at the throat of the most powerful Sith Lord in 1,000 years. He did not fail because he lacked skill, power, or conviction. He failed because he never looked behind him. His fate remains one of the most important untold stories in the history of the Jedi Order, and the fractured trust that led to his fall carries lessons that reach far beyond a single night on Coruscant. Questions surrounding the Korunnai Master have never been fully answered, and to understand the full scope of what was lost, you must explore whether he truly survived that fall, and why the tension between Windu and Anakin Skywalker made the destruction of the Jedi Order inevitable. Watch these videos next.